Okay. Okay. So back to headquarters for just a sec, please. Okay. Liability types right above those, if you go to the grid. These, I believe, we've kind of got set up, and we'll continue to map these. This is why those phase overrides weren't going to work on our departments, is because on the financial statements, they wanted labor broken out from payroll taxes, et cetera, on these things. And this is what gives you the capabilities from a financial standpoint to map these on the departments. So we have all these liability types. They're the cousin of the earnings types. Does that make sense? But the burden, the different employer burdens that can be managed over in the payroll, they're mapped here under liability types for GL purposes. And then earn types do the same thing for the reimbursement earnings and the different types of earnings.
So, and we talked about this a little bit too, especially on the construction burden, because this does it at the job level. We were talking about more granularly trying to do burden, right? We never figured that out.
Burden?
Wasn't it burden?
What do you mean?
So I was going back to the video and we had a discussion on this and we sort of left it open.
Let's talk about this.
So we talked about full job burden, like we could fully burden an entire job, but we couldn't increment that burden on an individual.
Yeah, we want to increment it.
So let's go to job cost programs.
So what Stacy's wish list is she wants to be able to assign a shop burden rate
That's good.
that would be different than the field burden rate if it was, I think primarily if it's a heavy fab shop project. So if there's a primary factor to the job that's going to be performed in the fabrication shop, then she wants to be able to capture that higher burden rate that is allowed per the contract.
Just for that work.
For that work, yeah.
Those
Because she's saying like on the, say like on the GMAX jobs that they have historically seen over the last couple of years that they can get anywhere between a 25 and 33% burden on fab shop. Cream?
Yeah,
Yes?
like 35.
Okay, so they're seeing that the GCs will allow it like a 35% burden on fab shop, where in the field they're allowing what, like a 12 to 15% burden at most. So she doesn't want to leave money on the table. So in that situation, in Maxwell, our limitation has been Maxwell has a one-to-one relationship with burden, one rate per project. So in Vista, with the whole demo, they said, oh yeah, we can support multiple burden rates per project. Now, when that conversation came up with you were
I want to show you how it works.
kind of saying, oh, well, you
And
gotta,
there's the guy that
you
sits
can
there
do
and
it,
promises you the
and-
world, and then there's the guy that sits there and shows you how
yeah,
it works.
when
So
you,
let me show you how
when
it
you
works.
build that, there
I will wrap
was
some rules around this. The thing will do anything.
some complexities
Because
to that.
obviously these programs must have some sort of set of rules. So let's skinny this up for just a second. Let's talk about liabilities, okay? So I'm in this one, hit the info tab. We called it 30 actual payroll plus 30%. Go to the liability types, okay? Now, here are the usual suspects. So remember those liability types we just saw 2 seconds ago over there in HQ liability types? These are them once again. If you pull that out just a little bit, and go ahead and skinny this back in, because that's just a description. Yeah, perfect.
Wow, this thing's all messed up.
Okay.
The line's over there.
So basically, this is what they're saying is I can only have one liability template per job, and this is exactly how Maxwell works, if I just focus on the liability template. Because on the job setup, there's only one place for this. I can't put like a liability template by the phase or anything like that. It's a project.
It's global per
It is
project.
global, it's a one-thing setup. So by doing this, go ahead, these are all liability types in payroll. If this is, it calculates what happens in payroll and burdens the job in job cost exactly, plus an additional 30% could pop over there or something like that. And that's probably similar how Maxwell works, correct?
Well, there's,
As far as only in one place being able to burden it
Yes,
and being able to put
there's
in
one-
one number, 1%.
yes.
And
gives
having
you-
that-
Gives you options on how you want to apply it to the project, but there's one place to put a rate.
We're looking at that and this is exactly what we're at. Because on the job setup, there's only one place to say what are the burden rules and you're gonna put them here, okay? Now the flexibility comes in this whole fixed rate thing, but that's a different feature. So let's go ahead, let's go to a job setup. Let's go to JC Job Master. So when you set up a job and you look at it, and you go to the liability template and hit an F4 and do a lookup here, I can have as many of these liability templates as I want, but as she stated, there's only one place to put them, and it's on the job and does do that. So if I want to use that flexibility, I'm stuck to that 1%. Cancel out of here. There are other ways to burden an expense to the job, but then you're going over to the payroll info tab and you're getting into what are these fixed rate templates. Hit F4, right now, let's go to the setup here. In the fixed rate thing, on the rate template detail, this is by craft, by class, where I can put in a fixed rate. But this isn't a fixed percentage rate. It's a fixed rate. Does Maxwell have that kind of fixed rate feature? You kind of with me what I'm talking about?
Yeah, we don't.
It's a loaded burden fixed rate. And the reason people want to use this is they want to hide payroll information in the job cost. Because
We don't, yeah, we're not utilizing fixed rates in that.
okay, because you understand here, if I send actual payroll over to a job, you could actually, if you had permission, see what people made, right? Because sending actual means send actuals.
Isn't that what
Send
Brian
earnings.
brought up last week, is
Yep.
the whole fixed rate thing? Yep.
The fixed rate means, when I bid the jobs, I bid them by what classification and I kind of have stuff. So that fixed rate, Don's a journeyman plumber, and my base rate and my fringe package for journeyman plumber is, I'm going to say it's straight time, it's going to be $80 an hour, and overtime, it's going to be $110 an hour. You know, and that's a fixed rate that's going over there. So if I do that, probably what Chris is thinking about is that's when they said, hey, by different classifications of people, I can push over and manage what I'm pushing to the job. But that's not by percentage. That's not doing the 30%, 25%, 35% she was talking about.
Yeah, how do I manage it at a job level? So I don't want to say every guy that works in a fab shop scope of work is automatically going to push out a certain percent. I want to be able to identify certain projects that situation is occurring on to drive that information.
Well, this fixed rate template you're looking at is on the job setup. Does that make sense?
Oh, okay.
I'm on,
So I'm assigning it to a specific project.
that is correct. Yeah, in this fixed rate template, go ahead and cancel out here for just a second there, So, cancel out here for just a second. I am on a specific project,
Okay.
on the payroll info tab, and I'm setting up a fixed rate set of rules, but it isn't a percent, you know. It's a earnings plus burden rate. It's like a loaded rate is kind of what I hear that called, because it's just not adding an additional percentage. It's putting a fixed rate amount not a fixed rate additional burden percent of 30% or 35%. Fixed rates are amounts going over there and not percentages.
I got a quick question on that.
Yes.
So we were in here and we have a shop burden as a liability type, and we also have the construction burden. And on the construction burden, we applied the 30%. Why couldn't we add this to that template, which was, where the heck was that? Oh, I'm on it right here.
Yeah.
So on this actual payroll, we create multiples of those depending, like this one's saying 30% burden, right?
Yeah.
Well, couldn't we have one that says like construction 30% and then we add that 60 code in there for shop burden and say shop burden 35% or whatever and have that as liability template 1? Would that be
You can have as many liability templates, but it will affect all earnings on that project because it's project specific.
Right.
It's not going to just
being
affect
able
the
to
shop guys
toggle.
and not the field guys.
Yeah.
I believe what Chris is saying is she's got her field guys and her shop guys. She only want to manage the shop guys with that and stuff.
Okay.
Okay, now, and that's job specific, she wants to do that. Because another place I can do it is in the payroll module. And on an employee by employee basis, I can put in a burden percent and I can drive that. But that is not job specific. That's driven by the employee, and I can put a percent on shop employees that's higher than field employees or something and do that.
But it'd be based on phase because we have like fab shop phase codes and we have,
No, he said you can't assign it at the phase
No,
level.
this JC liability
We were
templates at the
sold,
project level.
A mistruth.
Or
we were-
what they had
because-
said is you can manage it using fixed rates at like the craft class by
No,
a
we
certain.
specifically asked, could we have multiple burden rates for a project? Yes. That was a very clear question, because that
For the
was one of the
same
very
project?
specific concerns that Stacy had, is that we would be able to have multiple burden rates for a project. So I don't know if it was, well, in a roundabout way, could get there, because it was, yes, we,
Or the
Vista
employee
will
center could
support
have
that.
an employee-specific percentage on that, but over here on the job setup, there's nowhere, so cancel out here, what she's looking for, and so just click on here, at the phase level, and then so double click and open up that little phase, so we can go, so this table is the next, oops, did something pop up? Nope.
oh yeah, it did.
It popped up somewhere. It's just hiding from you.
Dang it.
Oops, is it over there?
It probably is off screen.
He's like, I know it's over there somewhere.
It
Uh-oh.
doesn't even show up in this list.
Where is that? Phase, it's stuck off our screen.
I don't even see it on this list. That's weird. Usually it shows up here and then we can move it
You
if it's
can
off
grab
screen,
it.
but it's not.
I mean, it seems like the easiest way to manage this would be to come up with an agreeable rate for shop people and have it driven through the payroll. But then you basically have to agree that every person who worked in the fab shop would be having this extra cost factor to them, instead of trying to figure out which jobs it applied to and which jobs it didn't. You would just, across the board, know that the shop personnel would have this extra cost factor and factor that into your analysis.
How can we get out of this? We can't. There. Oh, there it is. We can find it. Oh.
But
Yeah.
I'm open
No, it went away
to
again.
suggestions.
Well, but with that, we would have to set up, I mean, it would have to be associated.
Oh, there it is. Thank you.
Across the board, everybody, because you have a lot of, I mean, you don't have designated shop people. I mean, you
Well,
let it go in
if
and
they
out.
It's
worked
screwed
in the
this
fab
up
shop,
here.
That's
just like we
hit
changed
F4,
the
just to
S1
look
code
up.
for
Oh,
workers'
yeah,
comp,
yeah.
you would have to
There you go.
click them onto
Okay.
that fixed rate.
We're back.
I
Yeah.
mean, it would be a manual
So hit the info tab. So what the
Process.
system would
I'm not
have to
sure how
have is the
else to
JC
try to
liability
back
template at this level to manage it at the phase level. But here I can do work insurance codes, I can do other stuff, but I don't have that little template down at the phase level. It's at the project level. It isn't down here to drive the percent by phase. Otherwise, I'd be able to get Chris what she's looking at is now we're one layer lower at the job phase level. And this is where she'd like to be able to manage it. It's specific to the shop phase, drive a different percent from the rest of the job, but we don't have that percentage capabilities at this level. All I got is the fixed rate capabilities at the craft class level, which really may or may not even be the job phase level. Yeah.
Would it make a difference if we created an additional cost type for fab shop?
I can't do it at the cost type level either. If you
Okay.
did it cost types, that's one layer deeper in there.
Stars in the
And I can't do it deeper. It's actually above it. I can do it at the
Okay.
job level. I certainly can't do it at the phase. I can't do it at the phase cost type level.
All right.
Okay, so just so you know, that's where all those liability types are going to come together. Okay, so cancel out of them this time so it doesn't beat us up, and then cancel out here. So let's go to these, go to the bottom here, and let's hit that liability type. So having went through what we went through today, hit the liability types tab. This is something we have to decide upon, because when we start setting up jobs and testing this, what we do here is how it's going to work. Normally people send actuals over, and then if they want an additional burden percent, in addition to the actual burden sent over from payroll, then they enter it here and manage it at the project level.
So I got a quick question.
Yeah.
So just because this is called construction burden and we apply this at a project level for a construction project, does that mean that everything is burdened? Everything, all cost, all everything?
No, it's just the payroll.
No, this liability
Yeah.
All
burden,
labor though.
yeah, it's a
For
labor.
that job.
Yeah, it's a labor concept, not, it doesn't do a percentage of materials
I
or
gotcha.
equipment or subs or nothing like that.
Every dollar wage.
It's only labor related stuff is, because in time card entry,
Mhm.
people are gonna, the earnings are automatically gonna go over there based upon the time card entry by job, by phase, based upon the union classification, et cetera, et cetera. So the earnings are gonna go for what you see on time card entry is what you get.
Yeah, so non-union
So in
employees,
addition to the
employees,
earnings, how do we want to quote unquote burden our jobs? That's what the liability template says, these are the rules that we want to do. Some people just send over percents and push over a percent because they bid the jobs at a percent. They want to track the jobs by the same percent. Other people say, no. I got this sophisticated accounting system that will send over actuals over there. I want actuals to go over there. And then a little additional burden percent that isn't part of taxes, union benefits, workers' comp, general liability, everything that's processing. They want an additional 10% or 15 or whatever. And that's how they want to run their actual job cost labor reports, is actual plus an additional burden percent.
So what are we going to use this for, ever?
Those ones, I think you were put in there and you were brainstorming, so you did those probably after I got here when
Yeah,
you were
and
probably
part of that, I
brainstorming how
think,
you
is
want your
because we
burden to
have
affect the
different rates
jobs.
for those different types of jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And so with the shop burden, I think we were under the impression we were going to be able to have a different rate for a
Gotcha.
shop, but that doesn't sound like that's going to be the case. So I'm not sure. Who wants to
And
have
I
that
can do it on a
conversation?
job by job
Stacy.
basis.
Well, yeah.
I can't
Yeah,
do it on
because
a
you're just trying to
phase by
do the
phase.
shop employees, so if you did to the whole job, it's going to hit everybody's dollar per hour burden basically. No
Yeah,
matter what.
I
That's why I
mean,
asked
pure
that
water
question.
and insulation make perfect sense because those rates
Separate.
for each job are going to be different than maybe the construction job.
Mhm.
Service will be different, but the shop burden would hit all types of work.
All labor.
And
So can you explain to me in layman's terms, is it because shop employees have a little bit burden because your fab shop just has these additional related costs that you'd like to push to the job? Is that kind of the bottom line of
that's
what's
kind
going
of
to happen?
the, in layman's terms, because you pay
Okay.
for all this equipment,
Mhm.
you're running all the, so you're paying for the space, you're paying all the utilities, you're paying
Okay.
for all the equipment, you've got depreciation expense
Just trying to understand. So I think we can do a hybrid, and let me kind of explain what I think maybe might work in the payroll module for anybody working in the fab shop. We could put in a percent to them and then have that go over to the job. Then the standard percent would affect everybody. So what would be happening to those shop employees only is that additional little percent that you set up on the employee would go in over to the job in addition to the standard burden percent that we put here that would affect
So instead of
everyone.
35, we put a 5% to that.
Well, that was my suggestion,
Yeah.
but the only problem with that is unfortunately, we don't have a set 10 guys that work in the shop at all times. They toggle in and out of the fab, so already we're in a mode where we're kind of switching their workman's comp
So these
code.
will just be location-based.
Right,
Right.
and so we're already doing a little bit of manual manipulation if they move between the field and the fab shop. For the most part, we kind of have a core group of guys that kind of work out the shop, but we do have a few that kind of move in and out.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I was suggesting to Margaret. I said, I'm open for suggestions, but it sounds to me like we would have to kind of assign them that little, shop
We
allocation
were
when
able
they're
to
there.
manually override it in the time card processing. I mean, entering time cards manually, you have a little bit more flexibility with that. What happens when we go to the import? Would we just have to then potentially go back into those and switch them? Because we do have guys, especially as we start ramping up and depending on the projects, you'll have guys that will come in and maybe potentially only work in the shop 2 days, and then they'll be out in the field for 3 days. So there's certain times you'll have somebody working a full week, but you will have guys come in and out depending on the workload and the type of job they're working on. Because I think with the whole insulator group,
Mhm.
so the thing is though, if we have insulators who are going in and working in the shop, then it would be probably a similar situation. You'd want to be able to.
Yeah, because that's what Darrell was
Pull them out.
indicating, that they were gonna be buying some equipment where they're making something for the installation division, but then they would be going out and doing some installation also. So I don't know if that's.
Well, the only other option, if we can't drive it through there, go ahead and cancel out of here, Will, because there's lots of little variables for this. Go to job cost module for just a second, please. And go to JC allocation codes. So so basically what happens here is this is a month-end allocation type thing, and we haven't talked a lot about these, but basically where Vista created this was says, hey, if I can't drive it to it directly, because it makes more sense to do something as part of your month-end process, I can allocate to a job based upon whatever I want and do what's called a month-end allocation. So we could, if there was a known amount or something we were looking to allocate, say, let's take that amount and allocate it across any jobs, because that phase that you were looking to do it was a phase on the
Multiple phases.
a group of phases or something like that. So if I could capture that, then this is kind of a month-end proration of allocation for any job based upon whatever. Yeah, does that make sense? Because if I can't do it up front, I can always include it as some type of allocation or something like that. But those are my two choices.
Can you?
Either I use the templates to drive it there directly, or I have to do some sort of at the end of it and then allocate or do something as part of a month-end process. Yes.
Can you do an allocation by phase code?
Cost type, it looks like.
Well, you'd have to get your numbers by that, because every cost has to have job phase cost tag. So you could hit a job and call that description shop allocation or something, and it would have to hit a job phase cost type, and that phase would be shop something, but
That's where you push it to.
that's correct.
Yeah, I'm looking
So
up here.
when you do if you were to do this allocation, it's gonna sit and it's gonna show in that particular phase, it would show, the payroll time being hit, and then just a one line item.
It's not really
Allocation
doing the
at the
payroll
bottom.
time, does that make sense? It's doing a direct JC cost adjustment in job cost.
It would just show as a separate line item.
On the job cost
On the job
report,
cost
saying that it was a shop overhead allocation cost, that we somehow were able to hit that project realistically if we couldn't drive it the way we talked about in step one. This is the only other option.
Payroll,
Yeah, I just want you to know that this would be the other option that would be available if we couldn't make something bulletproof and make her happy as far as how it was going to work. Then this would be the only other option to somehow, as part of your month-end process,
Okay.
do some kind of take numbers that are in there and then send a little bit percentage to jobs within that phase. Does that make sense? And then do something there.
Well, and I kind of figure out this the most efficient way with not putting a huge burden on somebody's shoulder to figure out
Yeah.
every single, like even with payroll, you'd almost have to try to, if you're only going to burden certain projects, you have to keep track of those projects. If you were going to burden every guy that worked in the shop, you still have to keep track of the guy working in the shop to the guy working in the field. And is that clear on the time collection?
Yeah.
So I think we're going to have to table that conversation and talk a little bit
Okay,
more about
just
it.
want to make sure
I think
this
with
is an
this-
option.
I would think this would be more time consuming to manage, because you'd have to go in and you'd have to constantly, add jobs, take jobs away, potentially add phases.
No, not really. You'd run a report out of job cost as part of your month-end close. Normally, people would include all jobs because there is a bullet to just say all jobs.
Yeah,
All
because
jobs that
basically
have
you
this
said,
phase, look at it, you'd run a
if it
report.
has that fab shop phase code on it, go out there and grab any cost that's in there and add whatever rate
Or
finds
reverse on
that.
that. But like I said, if we can get around it, I would kind of prefer driving it through the liability templates and figuring out how to get the actual cost of that. That would be my first choice. But, there are other options to drive percentages to jobs or something, and this is something, I don't want us to forget about in other areas. Like I said, if it's burden, hopefully we can just use the liability templates in a combination or get close to the number she's looking for, but I cannot do it by phase. It is project level only. It isn't down on the next level. Okay. So as you say, let's cancel out of here. She's going to kind of talk about that, and then we'll hammer it out. Okay. Okay. So let's go back to that liability template thing. How many liability templates let's go to JC liability templates.
Oh, gotcha.
I guess this may be based upon, but without that little shop thing, just so you know, we can have as many of these as we want. And so go to the liability types tab. This one we call 30% because the additional burden we're sending over is 0.30.
So is there a copy function to set up additional liability
Go to file
templates?
at the top, left,
If we wanted to say set up,
copy.
use this
Click.
whole template, and then we
Click.
just maybe wanted to change the burden row?
Right there.
Okay, get it.
File copy template under JC liability.
So I can have as many of these as I want. Sometimes based upon where the job is or how far away it is, they'll, or certain variables, they'll have a whole bunch of, they can have 20, 25, 30, 35. They can have as many incrementals as you want. And usually they're bidding the job at about the same level that they're doing this. So this should coincide with some of the estimating features you can put in where you can bump up a burden percent. Because most estimating systems, are you familiar with how you're doing that in estimating? They can add whatever burden percents for labor that they want. So they want their actuals to be as close as their estimating system's criteria.
That's an Excel file that we use.
Okay, Excel, and do you put kind of it's one of the variables, a percent for labor?
Right.
And does that vary or is,
I don't know.
okay.
I know they have a place for it on their summary sheet though.
So really, if they had a whole bunch of those variables on their Excel summary sheet, we'd want to have the same corresponding things. So when it was part of the job setup, they'd be like, oh yeah, we estimated the project at whatever additional burden percent. Let's go ahead and set up Vista to kind of behave the same so that our estimated labor costs and our actuals are as close as possible. Okay. So maybe that's something to look into. And so you have to go to the liability types, and that's perfect. And now you've got it over there, and voila.
That's
So
pretty easy.
I can have as many of those as makes sense. And the key thing for the estimators to understand is that's in addition to actuals. You were throwing that?
Yep.
That's not just a loaded percent. That's an additional one besides taxes, union benefits, workers' comp, et cetera. Okay. Okay, so that's when every job we set up, that this is a required field on the job setup. They must select one of these choices. Okay. Okay. Any questions about this before we go to the next thing? But I just want to make sure you know where those liability types are related
How many
to.
groups do we have set up right now?
Two, 15 and 30%.
Set up to 15.
Okay.
We can copy as many of those as we want.
So when we set up additional templates, do we also have the rows of the burden rates set up that we're picking?
Okay, so let's make sure we did this 100%. So go to 30 and hit the liability type. So any of the ones that say exactly as payroll, these should be payroll liability types. And then the last one, hit the basis earnings codes. It's go to 30% of, and since they're union, I guess it's usually going to be 1, 2, 3. We added 4 in there because 30% of what? Does that make sense? This thing's called 30%. This is saying 30%. And it's copying over when you did the copy. So now when you go back to the grid and you look at Mr. 15 and go to the basis codes, basis earnings codes, it's the same thing. It's 15% of earnings is what it's saying. So
But
that has to be set up so it knows 15%
I'm
of
confused
what?
because it's saying 15% of, but where is that 15% set at?
If it's rate, it needs to do a percentage of something. If it was exactly as payroll, I'd never have to go in here and put in the basis earnings codes because it would be non-relevant. But anytime I put in a percent, I have to go to this tab and make sure I tell it a percent of what. What is the basis of that 15 or 30 or 20%? And we're just saying earnings. And that copies over during the copy.
But the code 30 isn't necessarily telling me a rate, it's just the
Grid.
identifier
Grid.
of
Yes.
construction.
Yep.
Yeah, in the liability type tab there, that's what's
That's
telling.
the value that's.
Okay.
When he highlights 30, that's when that becomes available. So just click on 30 to show her. It's grayed out until you grab that. And now it's available.
Oh, I see.
So we're just syncing up the description with what it is. So it's
Okay.
behaving properly 15% of
So as we set
earnings.
up new templates, and we'll keep
You can
reusing 30, 30, 30, but we're gonna change the
Change
rate.
the liability. So if you
Okay.
wanted to, so if you clicked on the liability type 30
Mhm.
and hit F4,
You're picking that from.
then
the
you can
list.
pick 35 for service burden or 40 for pure water or 50 for insulation. And then you come over in whatever rate.
Plug in the rate you want.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you apply at the very top, you see the liability template. We had number 1, number 2, number 4, however many you want for those different ones. So you could have one that's called service burden or whatever, and then that
At
liability
30%,
template
15%.
gets applied at the job.
Right.
On
So
the
we
job
still
sheet.
have to kind of have a set of predefined rates, just
Mm-hmm.
like we do now,
Mhm.
that everybody's kind of picking from.
Correct.
Okay.
And then the JC department master, which is because this percentage has to go somewhere, it has to be mapped to the general ledger.
Correct.
Because this is going to be an additional expense. So we're
That's
going
why
to,
I have set up $1 million burden applied for every possible combination of division and department. was a very long list.
Si, señorita.
Yes.
Okay, okay, so, yeah, let's go to file, copy template. All we gotta do is call this one 20%, so we can copy 15 and hit enter.
I don't have the number here.
Oh, yeah, we gotta call it something, 3, yep, copy. So now, 2 and 3 are cloned. Now, all he's gotta do is click into the liability types and then hit 30, because he's gotta be on that, and just point that to 0.20, and he got himself a second one that's set. So pretty easy to copy and get him rolling. It's just her getting the sign off from ownership that, yeah, this is gonna work and make sense and burden, and you're estimating people when they set it up. The summary thing on their spreadsheet should link to this thing. So I bid it at 15%, choose the 15% one. I bid it at 23%, choose the 23, or whatever, however it works. Okay?
Yeah, so do we do that to estimating, on the estimating template, or is that in the job setup template? Where they put their burden? Like, I want this job to be,
It's on the job setup template.
it is there, but I'm,
And we added it as a drop down, but unfortunately, it's not a required drop down.
Oh,
So
okay.
people are still not dropping down and picking it.
Yeah, Vista's a required field. so
Yeah,
they
and I
will have
asked
to
if there's a way to
choose.
make it a required drop down, and I found maybe there's a way to do that, but. there's-
so I'm just wondering, in estimating though, our summary, I mean, how are they doing that? Is that negotiated basically? It is, right?
Well, right now, it's either 0%, 20% for the AMS, or 12% for construction. And right now, so many people just skip over that and leave it blank.
Mhm.
And so I asked our staff if they could make it a drop-down field. So now it says 0, 12, and 20, so they have to pick it. Well, what's happening is they're still just skipping over it.
So we can-
And so I'm like, well, is there a way to make that required so they have to pick it? And that's not been done yet.
I mean, the labor rate sheets out there on the O drive is what Samara uses for dropping in, 15, 20% to basically get.
So
costs.
she is looking at that, that's what I was asking.
Yeah, for the field guys,
Mhm.
we update them, and then it has all the tax rates in there and everything. And then they go in and change the burden percentage to see how it
How it
feeds
looks.
across for their
Okay.
totals.
So they are doing it.
Mhm.
Okay,
So it looks like our HQ liabilities, I mean, back to that's what we were sort of going through, right? And then we sort of got to that. So
those are ready.
these are pretty, yeah, they're
Yeah, we
done.
just gotta hammer out a few little things on how to use them on our JC liability templates.
Yeah, where to apply them and
then,
stuff.
we can apply them strategically.
The master list though is pretty much
I think
done,
we're good to go there.
right?
I agree.
You guys all agree on these?
Yeah.
We don't have any more to add, right?
No, and it sounds like we'll have to remove 60, so I'm wondering if we
Okay.
should just delete it now, so we don't think we can do anything with it.